On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth round his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Welcome to the last of our science sessions. Here we take a look at perhaps the most spectacular of the signs, the raising of Lazarus. In doing so, we will also wrap up the series. So there's a lot to get through, and I'm afraid I leave a lot out as well. But bear with me as we take this roller coaster. There is some background to this sign. The Pharisees are after Jesus, and there was real danger for him. He hears of Lazarus' illness, and despite the danger, he decides to go to Judea anyway, but only after finishing off what he had been doing. He arrives at the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus late. His friend is dead and decomposing, having been in the tomb for 4 days already. By now, his friends have a pretty good idea of who he is, so they're disappointed by his lack of pastoral presence. They have seen him heal people before, So why didn't he bother to heal Lazarus? Of course, Jesus had already alluded to his disciples in a similar way to the previous sign, that this situation was occurring for God's glory, and that the Son of God may be glorified. Verse 4. With Jesus approaching, Martha went out to meet him and tells him that if he had been there, this would not have happened. I often wondered whether she was rebuking him, but I actually think not. She continues with great faith and says to Jesus, "But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." She is saying, in other words, even in this hopeless situation, I have hope and faith. And after a discussion about the resurrection of the dead, the common belief that all will rise again at the last day, a belief of the time, Jesus makes a spectacular claim that needs to be taken seriously. Here it is, along with Martha's response. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." That's John 11:25 to 27. Martha has been reading the signs. She sees that they point to him being Messiah. She sees that they point to him being the Son of God and the one who is to come, the one who will usher in a new covenant. She sees what the spiritually blind leaders have not seen, but she's about to see more. I find it significant that Jesus gives such an authoritative response that oozes deity. Only God can effect the resurrection of the dead, and only God can give life. When he sees Mary, the other sister, she says the same thing to him. "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." And Jesus' response to her is different. It's more emotional. He's filled with compassion and even cries. Now, the Greek word translated here as wept, or for weeping, is quite different from the word used when Jesus cries over Jerusalem at the triumphal entry. At that event, he literally sobs, but here his tears are a compassionate response to the pain of Mary and others. The word used means to shed a quiet tear and has a compassionate connotation about it. Jesus is not in despair here. His response to Mary is incredibly human and touching. Put the two responses together and we have Jesus as God and Jesus as human. John presents to his listeners Jesus' identity right there. It is what they would call a Christology. But for the doubters there is more. John states that there was already a smell coming from the tomb. Jesus called him out of the tomb and Lazarus walks out. Here there can be no doubt that Lazarus was dead. It's a truly remarkable event. Only God or God's appointed could have the power to do this. Elijah does so in the Old Testament, as does Elisha, the widow of the Zarephath's son in 1 Kings 17 for Elijah, and the raising of the Shunammite's son in 2 Kings 4 verse 20 to 37 for Elisha. Something subtle in the text affirms this. Lazarus' name, which means God has helped. Yes, it is God who has done this thing. Both Elijah and Elisha are mighty prophets of God. And if I may point out the obvious, the Jewish people witnessing this sign and those listening to John recounting it would have known about these prophets and their miracles. Once again, the sign points to something deeper. I think it's worth pointing out also that when Jesus interacts with Martha and says that he is the resurrection, he echoes some famous and well-known words once again. He says, I am. He says, I am the resurrection. And once again, to the Jewish people present and the Jewish people listening to John's Gospel, there's something that rings about that phrase, I am, Yahweh. Unfortunately, those who have positions to protect were unable to read the signs though. Now I'll have to cap the Lazarus story here because I want to reveal what this is all about. I know that you already have a very good idea. I mean, the signs have variously pointed to God is doing a new thing, the messianic time has arrived, and a new covenant is being carved out, for instance, the wedding at Cana. Jesus is a great healer who can effect healing even without being present with the patient, like the royal official's son. Jesus is more than a great teacher. Jesus is a great prophet. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Son of God. And a few of them point to Jesus is God. But let's look at what John, the Gospel writer, says. Jesus had resurrected and appeared to his disciples. Now, Thomas had doubted and eventually becomes the first person in Scripture to proclaim Jesus as God. So I'm reading from John 20, verse 28. Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And then he says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This is the purpose of the signs. The signs in John's Gospel are a challenge to us. We have the choice to believe in the witness that is placed before us or not to. If we do believe the accounts, then what do they point to? In my view, we can't conclude that Jesus was merely a great prophet or a fine spiritual teacher. The Jewish listener also couldn't say that he was a Messiah who would liberate Israel from Roman rule like a powerful king. Remember, they wanted to make him king. We saw how Jesus withdrew from that. Can we conclude, along with his disciples and Mary and Martha of Bethany, Thomas, Peter, and others, that he is God's anointed Messiah, who has come to free people from slavery to sin and to overcome death? Can we conclude along with them that he is the Son of God, who has ushered in a new covenant with his people? And finally, has Jesus stopped providing signs for us? Perhaps, unlike the self-important leaders in Jesus' time, we just need to be more open and attentive to his work in our lives. Unfortunately, the leaders couldn't make the jump, and they plotted to kill him. Soon after this event, Jesus is the one lying in a tomb. But we know how that eventually turns out. He is the ultimate tomb raider. He is risen. So thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Please remember to go to the questions on the scripturetogether.com webpage, and let's go out from here reading the signs. God bless you.